Hi. I think we should get started. Thank you for coming tonight. If you don't already know me, my name is Alea Austin, and I'm a second year in ceramics. I'm delighted to introduce Kristen Morgin, who I had the pleasure of spending some time with these past few days. For me, Morgin's work tugs at the meaning of ephemera and our relationships to familiar objects. Her trompe-l'oeils create a sense of longing as well as unease. She has described her work as being able to give her things that she can't have by creating objects of memory and desire. This is something I resonate with in the context of world building. As makers, we have the agency to craft our own environments. All materials are real, even if their final arrangements function differently from what they represent. Morgin's practice incorporates ceramics, painting, drawing, and collage. She is known for her unfired clay sculptures, but her current work has been drawings on paper. Morgin received a BA in art at California State University, Hayward, and an MFA in ceramics at Alfred University. Her work has been shown widely in the United States and abroad. Her work is in the permanent collections of the Hammer Museum, San Francisco Museum of Contemporary Art, the Smithsonian American Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Please join me in welcoming Kristen Morgin.
Hi, can you hear me all right? Okay, all right. So I've selected way too many slides and I tend to ramble on. So, but I will tell you before I start that I have an encore if you're interested. So, which is a puppet show. So if you're still interested, I'll show you the puppet show at the end. Anyways, this is where I live, and it is also my studio. I have a studio in Gardena, California, it's near Los Angeles. I live here and work here. I share the space with my partner, who is also an artist and a former alumni of Cranbrook. She got a second degree in occupational therapy, and now she's working as an occupational therapist. And we share the space with our 6 cats. So I thought I'd show you the interior of my studio. For about a year, I've been working on creating what I call a library museum, and it's kind of like a space that houses my collections of collections. And I collect toys, artwork, records, comic books, all kinds of used furniture, found items, and I use these things often in my work. There's my own artwork in here, and there's artwork that belongs to my friends. Just beyond this enclosure is my central workshop, and I mostly work on clay things kind of in the pit there in front of the car. Just beyond that car, on the other side of the wall, is another room that I use for storage mostly. I don't like this car as much as the other one, so I pile boxes on top of it so I don't have to look at it. But this is some more of the library museum, and you can get a taste for all kinds of things I like to collect and keep, like all of these objects have some kind of meaning or story attached to them, and I could tell you. But I won't. But there's just a ton of really cool stuff in this space. My father made this ship. He was a chemical engineer, but he liked to tinker and make things, and for a while he was really stuck on making pirate ships with driftwood. These are some of my records and comic books. And these are just more bric-a-brac, things that I've made. I do fire and glaze things sometimes, So I first started making objects with unfired clay when I was a graduate student at Alfred. And around the middle of my first semester there, I decided that I was not going to use any fired clay for the rest of my stay there. And that was a poor decision to make at that time when I was a student at Alfred. I did manage to get a degree in ceramics, but I've continued to work in unfired clay since then. So I wanted to show you some of my favorite things that I've made and throughout my career. So I've been working as an artist since forever. When I was training as an artist, I did painting and drawing and ceramics. And when I got to graduate school, I really wanted to do both painting and drawing as well as make things with clay. But I was at Alfred, and my professors were really not encouraging of me continuing to draw and paint while I was there. I was there to do ceramics, and they really wanted me to stick to that. So I said, it's fine, I'll put away drawing and painting while I'm here, and I'll continue to make things with unfired clay. So when I got out of graduate school, I still continued to keep drawing and painting secretly, and I did drawing and painting, but it was really only for myself. But sculpture was the thing that I put out into the world. Shortly after graduate school, I got a tenured track teaching position at Cal State University Long Beach. And that job paid bills while I was developing my work. And I made larger and larger and larger work. And at some point, I decided I wanted to see if I could make a car with unfired clay. So the first car was really just to see if I could do it. This is about the fifth car that I made, and with every car, I wanted to investigate something different. This car was going to go into a big show in Los Angeles, and so I wanted to tie it into Los Angeles. And so I made it, I modeled it after lowriders. I wanted to make a car with flames on it, so it does have flames on it. Lowriders and car culture is very important to Los Angeles, as it might also be in Detroit. But the other things that this car had tied into Los Angeles was that in the movie Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean drove maybe 51 Mercury, and this was based on 49 to 51 Mercuries. So although the bumper is from a 57 Chevy, I believe, and somebody remarked that you can't really put that grill on this car, but you made it work somehow. I don't know how. So anyways, this was one of my very favorite cars that I made. So often when people would see these cars or these objects that I made, they told me how much they felt like they were about death. But I really saw them as something very different, that these objects looked like they should not be there, but they were resisting their demise, and so they were really about sustaining themselves even when so much of them were gone. This car over there is based on a Fiat 500, which is a car from the 60s from Italy. And I went to Italy and I saw these cars all over the place and I just fell in love with them. They have a nickname. They're known as Topolino, which means little mouse. And they're kind of like this small but mighty little car. And they're like very utilitarian. They can drive over every terrain. Every Italian will tell you some story about how they nearly lost their life in one of these cars. And there's these kind of remarkable little cars. And so originally I wanted to make 2 of them and pair them together. But as I was making the car, I read a description of a piano that Beethoven had owned. And I just liked the description of his piano so much, I decided to pair this car with the piano. And the car, it kind of represents like the common man, and Beethoven's piano kind of represents like high culture, high class. But I felt like in this state of ruin, like it put them on a level and even playing field. So when I originally made them, they were shown together in a show. But then for many years, they were shown separately. The car went as far away as Korea and came back. And the piano was also shown widely. Now they are both in the same collection at the Hammer Museum. But I don't think the Hammer knows that they were originally made as a couple. So but we can tell them, it's fine. So, anyways. When I got out of graduate school, my time in graduate school was so limited about what I could do, like with unfired clay. It was bad enough that I was making clay sculptures, because at Alfred, that is not ceramics. It's technically not, to be fair, ceramics is fired and glaze, and I was making sculptures out of clay or dirt or, something else, So, but I got out of graduate school and I was very excited to explore all the other things that I could do to depurify the medium, that I was often accused, like, you can't put found objects in with your sculptures, it's going to depurify the medium. So in this way, I discovered that I could make like a wire frame, and I could take clay and I could glue it to the wire. And I would use, and I started with small objects, and they incrementally, with each piece, got larger and larger. And at the time, I was very interested in collage, so a lot of these smaller pieces had kind of like a stage set that I would populate with these paper cutouts and collage elements. So those cups, teapots, a whole series of them, along with all kinds of things. Like there was a tricycle, there was a deer, there were several like large animal heads, like trophy heads that you would put on the wall. These series, there was an original series of 9 cellos, as well as 150 paper collages, were all part of a show that was called The Ticking Elephant and Other Surviving Excerpts of the Hope Symphony. I invented some story. I invented some story about a Siberian monk who was put in a labor camp and wrote this incredible symphony that was never played, but he had written it on the insides of people's clothing and on the undersides of floorboards, and the symphony was going to be performed over the course of 3 days, and it would include the sounds of animals in a forest and people eating in a dining hall, and it would incorporate music as well as the sounds of crickets. And I passed this off as the truth and gave very serious lectures about this monk. And that was my way to kind of tie all these objects together. But really, had you asked me at that time what the work was really about, I would have said, well, it's about the sound that cellos make. But it wasn't really about that either. This was a very, very hard time in my life where I had lost a very close friend who had died. And I just didn't know what to do with that grief. And so I put my head down and I just worked like a fiend. And I poured all of that sorrow into all of these works. So it's kind of like some of the saddest work that I've ever made. And this is a group of 7 cellos that, like much of that work, didn't survive after the show. I was young, poor, and had no room for all of these sculptures, so much of it I destroyed right after the show. I would have destroyed all of these cellos too had my friend not said to me at the time, like, what are you going to do with those cellos? And I said, well, I'm going to have to destroy them. I have nowhere to put them. You've seen the size of my apartment, which was tiny, 1-room apartment above a business. And she said, why don't we get you a larger apartment? And so I got a larger apartment, and then I kept them in these skeletal crates stacked up in my apartment. And many years later, my gallerist was visiting my apartment for the first time, and he was like, oh my God, what is all this? And I says, oh, it's some cellos that I made. And he was like, can I show these? And I said, no. And so, but then some years after that, I did finally show them. The reason why I never wanted to show them was because they were just kind of too precious for me to want to sell. So this piece was very pivotal for me. After I showed that first car, that lowrider, it was in a big show in Los Angeles. It was my big introduction to contemporary art. And all of a sudden, I went from somebody who nobody knew who I was to I was the girl who was making those clay cars. And I didn't want to be the girl who makes the clay cars for the rest of her career. So I'd gotten sabbatical at this time. I also had gotten tenure. I had won a grant, so I had some money, And I used that money to pay for a larger studio. And I went into that larger studio with all my time and money and space. And I said, I'm going to make something, but it's not going to be a car. And I had no idea what it was going to be. So I looked around my studio, and I had a Monopoly game in there. And I was like, what would it look like if I made a Monopoly game? Like, up until this point, most of my works were very large and sculpturally very complex. So this was the first time that I experimented with painting on unfired clay. Unfired clay is extremely fragile. With those cars and larger sculptures, the cellos, I was building a kind of wooden and wire armature, and I was mixing clay with glue and sticking it to the wire form to make the shapes. With the smaller pieces, I couldn't really add so much glue. With this piece, I really, really, really wanted to make it look as though it was made out of clay. So it was important for me to distress the surface. So I'd paint it and then scratch it off, and then I would purposely break things and then glue them back together. So a lot of these things are missing chunks and stuff like that. But as I got better at painting things, and as my skill improved, the objects become less recognizable that they're made out of clay. But this is the first time I'm really experimenting in this way. It's the first time I'm using color, and I'm throwing everything at this piece. Like, there's acrylic paint on here, there's craft paints, there's ballpoint pen and graphite and markers and wood stain and shoe polish. So this was just the start of kind of my current work now. I made several games. This is a game that I made much later, and I took two games. I took Candyland and I took Sorry, and I put them together to make Sorryland. And I just sort of populated it with cards that had to do with asking for forgiveness and repentance and things like that. But you can tell my skill is getting much better, and so it started where I was just like trying to make objects that I owned, and I owned a lot of books, and I would make the book that I owned, not just any copy of Catcher in the Rye, but my copy of Catcher in the Rye, you know, so like, and then oftentimes early on I would show the original book with the book that I made, and they would be this kind of like couple. But eventually I just became interested in making many more things that I owned and making found objects and putting them together into these larger, more complex still lifes. So this is one of my largest still lifes that I made. I really love this piece. It's called Heart and Soul, or The Garden of Earthly Delights. And from afar, just like the Hieronymus Bosch painting, these objects seem pretty benign. But as you get closer to it, you realize there's an uneasiness in them, because I made most of the things in this still life, but not everything. So when you discover, oh wait, she didn't make the chair, but did she make the cardboard? Did she make that wood? Did she not make that wood? And when you enter into it, it becomes unworldly in some way. The objects that I make feel like they belong to some other place, even though they're real objects, just like any object. They don't really operate the way that you would hope that they would. They're not like a book where you can open it up. It's not like a paper cup where you could crumple it and throw it away. It's made out of clay. So it's got this like very simple materials doing very miraculous things. It's painted dirt, so that was my reasoning in continuing to use the whole unfired clay thing. I've always loved seeing that. Like a lot of times, like Russian artists in exile are using like crayon on cardboard, and it's like this beautiful, amazing piece. And so that is kind of what I liken this to. And much of my work is about the value of things and what they're worth. Like, is an object of art more precious if it doesn't have a long lifespan? We certainly pay a lot of money for experiences, like when you go to see a play or hear a piece of music being played. But we don't do that with art. And we sort of decided that the things that will last for a long time have the most value. But I'm really putting the question before you with pieces like this, like maybe my skill as an artist, in making this thing where you can't distinguish what I made and what I didn't make, like maybe that skill is what the value of this piece is wrapped up in. And maybe things in the world that don't last in the world, maybe they are more precious because they are so fragile and they might go away, and our time with them is very short compared to other things. This is the heart and soul part of this piece. It looks like they're playing that song, So these larger still lifes sort of start with this kind of like, I take a bunch of things from my studio and I spend a lot of time arranging them and putting them together in these kind of sketches. So these are original objects, and then once I decide on a composition that I like, I will very slowly take pieces out, I will make them, and I will replace the thing that I made with the thing that was once there. And so that's how I figure out composition. And this is also like a big part of this process that takes me a long time. So I found out around 2018 that me and Jennifer Aniston are about the same age. I also know I grew up in Northern California, and Jennifer Aniston grew up in Southern California. I watched Friends back in the day, but I was never really a scholar of Friends, and I never really felt like I had anything in common with either the characters on the television show nor the actors. But as I was digging into Jennifer Aniston's life and from what I could get from the internet or whatever, like I was like, I bet there are a lot of things that we have in common, and I bet there's a lot of crossover. So I decided in 2018 that I wanted to make a portrait of Jennifer Aniston, and I would do this by making a fictitious book sale, and I would call it Jennifer Aniston's Used Book Sale. And I would make books that Jennifer Aniston might have at a book sale. So this is kind of some pictures as the piece was in progress. The books I chose because I felt like, certainly like old Hollywood, I'm sure she knows a lot about old Hollywood and is enamored with old Hollywood movie stars like Marilyn Monroe. She's made many commentary about what an animal person she is, so I put animal books in there. I think she has a lot of books on self-help and self-healing and things like that, so there's a lot of things like that in there. There are some things that I put in this where I was kind of playing around with her personal life, so you can tell this cassette tape by the Police. The first song is called Can't Stand Losing You, and there's another song on this cassette that was called Be My Girl, and it said, to Jen, XOXO Brad. And this piece, like, with some imagination, you might think that Charlie Brown here is a representative of Brad Pitt, and this might be Jennifer Aniston, and this might be Angelina Jolie. I imagine that if she had a DVD of the Notorious movie where Brad Pitt and Angelina might have met, maybe she might have defaced it a little bit. The Velveteen Rabbit was a book that was featured in one of the episodes of Friends. I imagined she had a really good sense of humor. I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed my mind about Jennifer Aniston, and I think her timing and her wit are really, they're right on. Like, so some more animal books. Romance novels, I think, yes, and also more old Hollywood. Some more comic books. The Karate Kid, I felt like was a movie that was so representative of like the Valley, and Jennifer Aniston grew up in Sherman Oaks. So anyways, these are all these books that I made. I put them together on this table, and the legs were like sawhorses, and it looked like a garage sale, like book sale. And it was shown at an art fair, and this art fair was in a very famous hotel called the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. And so my work, there were several artworks that were in satellite places throughout the hotel, and my work was one of these works. Most of the art fair was happening on the 11th floor. And so for part of the time, my work was displayed in this area, and you could see in the background there were floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. And I learned later that these books are cut in half and screwed into the wall, and these are secret doors that used to open to a speakeasy, but now they are secret doors to the hotel theater. So I saw those when I was doing a tour of this hotel, and I was like, I want to do something there. And that's when I decided Jennifer Aniston's used book sale is coming to town. So throughout the hotel, I made these sandwich boards, and I put, Jennifer Aniston's used book sale and marked where it was. For the rest of the time during the show, the show was like a 4-day event. For 2 days, it was with the secret doors, and for 2 days, it was in the central lobby of the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. So the crowds that came to see this were really interesting, and it made the piece really much more interesting. So some of the people who came were there, and they were there to look for artwork. Now, because you can't really distinguish that I made these books, people who were there looking for artwork would see this, and they would say, oh, it's some found object artist doing some kooky thing with Jennifer Aniston or whatever. And because the books, there is more there than what you think there is, and how I felt like that really also blended in with how I felt about Jennifer Aniston. Like, there's more there than you think there is. And so then the other people that came to see this show were tourists, and they didn't know there was art that was going to be there. And in fact, they didn't realize it was art. So many of them came in and they saw these books there, and they're like, oh my God, Jennifer Aniston, is she gonna be here? Oh my God, I had this book too. Why is Jennifer Aniston's book so expensive? Like, I have the same copy of Charlotte's Web. What's the deal? But then somebody else came to see the art show, and that person was Brad Pitt. So Brad Pitt is a collector of art. I am sure, I'm 100% positive, Brad Pitt did not see Jennifer Aniston's used book sale. There was another way to come into the hotel, which brought you in from the valet parking, and that brought you into the back of the hotel where registration was. And if you were Brad Pitt or anybody else, you would look up to the top stairs. To see the show on the 11th floor, you had to take the elevators, which you could only catch in the central lobby of the hotel. So you would have had to go into the central lobby. At the top of the landing of those stairs was a sandwich board that said Jennifer Aniston's used book sale this way. And I think if I were Brad Pitt and I saw a sign that said Jennifer Aniston's used book sale that way, I would have turned around and gone the other way and saw all the other art that was there to see in the bungalows. So I'm pretty sure that's what he did. However, People magazine was there, and they put two and two together. They saw Brad Pitt there, and they saw this piece there, and they took it upon themselves to write an online article where my name, Jennifer Aniston, and Brad Pitt are all mentioned in the same article. And on that day, I was like, bucket list, check, check, and check. It was so exciting. To this day, I don't think Brad Pitt or Jennifer Aniston or nobody knows about this, but I thought it kind of added so much more to the piece. This was one of the last large still lifes that I've made in recent times. I started this in 2020 and finished it in 2022. I call this piece The Moon. I was tempted to call it It Reminds Me of My Father, because it reminds me of my father. And many of the objects were things that he owned or possessed. But again, I have this like really uncanny thing going on where I make most of the things in these still lives, but not everything. So there's plywood that I've made in this picture, there's a cassette tape, there's cardboard that I've made, there's the record I've made, but there's other things that I have not made. So when you see them, it makes you question, like, reality. What's real and what's not, you know? So, 2020 was like quite a year. And I don't know about you guys, but I had this sensation throughout 2020, like, have you ever watched a sitcom where something happens and it makes everybody go like, and then you hear that sound effect of the needle scratching the record? You know, I felt like 2020 was kind of like that year. And a lot of horrible things happened in that time. And I had quit my tenured position in 2009. I mostly earned my living by making and selling work with a commercial gallery that I've worked with since 2006. And I very quickly realized in 2020, well, there goes that career. I better think of a plan B quickly. And so, like many people, I just got depressed and I stopped making things and I just didn't know what I was going to do. So then at some point I had this realization that nobody was interested in what I was doing in my studio. Nobody was coming. There were no shows to prepare for. If there were shows to prepare for, they were going to be postponed, and I didn't have to worry about it. So, like, it was all of a sudden this realization, like, nobody is interested in what I'm doing here. So all I have to do is just whatever I want. And so I made artwork that really, is how I always, intended to make artwork, like for myself. I was the only audience. It's just there because I enjoy the process, because I like making these things, because I like seeing them in the world. And so, first I started making collages. These are some collages that I made in the 2020s and 2021. I made so many collages with prints in them. I felt like prints was a grounding force, and that if I could just put prints in all of my artwork, everything would be all right. These were very different. The way that I had made collages in the past, I would, cut things out and glue them together. This, I kind of had this large table in my studio, and I had piles of stuff that I'd cut out from magazines and books, and I would go in there every day and I would set things up and I would take a photograph. And so they only exist as photographs on my computer. They were never printed out. And, I kind of liked having this archive of things that I was making in my studio. And they could just be for me. So, these are some more collages. So something else that I did in 2020 is I started drawing my own emojis. And I know it's old-fashioned, but I went on Facebook because at that time I didn't have an Instagram account. And I just would reply to things as you would reply to something with an emoji. Like you need a sad rainbow emoji sometimes, or you need this little strong heart guy, or a Moby Dick emoji. And so, I had a bit of fun doing this with my friends. And one of my friends who lives in Spain, she sent me this photograph, and she said, "Look what my daughter did yesterday." And I said, "You have the coolest daughter ever." And she says, "Yeah, I think so too." And apparently she had showed her daughter this emoji that I had drawn, and I was just and she wanted it tattooed. So I was just so flattered. So I eventually put together this collection of about 88-ish emojis, and it was put together as a piece, and it was called From Your First Thumbs Up to the End of Your Rope. And this here is a rope emoji down there in the corner. So forever, I've been making drawings on Post-it notes. And I really feel like some of them are clearly doodles, some of them are more intricate drawings, but I really feel like, everybody has rules for about, this is my work, but this is just something that I do on the side. It's just, it's my crochet or whatever. It's not really my work. But I really felt like this is also my work too. And I had an experience where, I imagined, taking that Post-it note drawing of a mermaid getting eaten by a shark, and you put that together with, one of those mean cars, and it, the mermaids get taken up a notch by that car, and the car, gets taken down a notch by the lightness of the mermaid getting eaten by a shark. But as an artist, it's really hard to go to your gallerist and say, here's a little Post-it note drawing that you could put in a $500 frame and maybe sell in one of my next shows, and so I can't get him to be good with just a single Post-it note drawing, no matter how good the drawing is. So in 2015, I was like, I am going to do something good on a Post-it note. And so I made this drawing on many, many Post-it notes. And because of its size, it felt like it was important. Also, at this time, I felt like I really, the world around me was falling apart, and I felt like I need a hero. And so I chose to draw Underdog, who was kind of a spoof of Superman. And so he was kind of a superhero, but, he's a cartoon, and what good could he actually do? And I also made the parade balloon version of Underdog, and I drew it on Post-it notes. I showed it with this little oscillating fan that would blow just the bottom Post-it notes, and just move them a little bit. It looked like it was trying to blow all of them, but it couldn't reach that far. And so everybody's just trying here. We're just trying. I did get my gallerist to show it in his gallery, but later on it was actually shown in Japan. So that was the largest my Post-it note drawings got. Also, during the pandemic and during lockdowns, I made a lot of marionettes. I made a lot of puppets. And I also developed my plan B, and I was going to give up this whole fine art career entirely, and I was going to become a writer and illustrator of children's books. So I started writing these weird little poems, and I was imagining the world without certain letters of the alphabet. And they started I used the names of my nieces to inspire me. So I have a niece, and her name is Elena, and so I wrote one poem that was called The End of Ease. I had The Last of the L's and The Absence of A's. So then I was like, well, I need to start illustrating. So I started making drawings. And first I just started drawing just whatever I wanted. Like, I felt like drawing Valentine's, and I just drew Valentine's. And so then I was trying to illustrate these poems, and I couldn't stick to the lines in the poems, and just all these weird images were coming to me, and it was just so exciting because I didn't know really what was going to happen with these drawings. It would just be like I'd wake up, I feel like drawing a mermaid today, and there should be a merman, and she should be holding an eel, and Felix the cat should be dropping a bomb, coming out of the sky. And so these were exciting to me. I really had no idea where they were going to go. I had a record in my record collection, and it's a Hall & Oates record, and it's called H2O. And on the back of the record album, there's John Hall and Daryl Oates are looking at each other, and because the record is called H2O because it's like water, and also Hall and Oates times 2, but with the water portion, they went with sweat because it was somehow sexy or something, and so they're really sweaty. And so I draw this drawing, and then as I'm drawing it, I thought to myself, this should also be an advent calendar. So I cut out windows, and I made all of these secret little drawings behind the windows. It somehow worked, again, here, I was excited to draw this airplane, and then I thought, well, it should be in a forest, and it should be playing hide-and-go-seek with Thumper. This drawing here, I took almost exactly from an ice cream truck that I saw in the neighborhood. I would go on these daily long epic walks, and I changed it only in that in the background there were ice cream sundaes floating over the ocean, and in the back on the ice cream truck there was an island, and I made I thought I was making 2 whales, but then I imagined this as one really long whale, and I could never unsee it. So I got, ice cream and a whale. SpongeBob and Elmo were also on the ice cream truck, and then way up at the top it said soft serve ice cream. And I changed that sign, and I made a banner, and I took women's names who are in pop songs, and I paired them with flavors of ice cream. So it says Roxanne strawberry, Lucille pina colada, Lola blueberry, Venus lemon, and Billie Jean. I had been doing a lot of drawings of the cosmos, like the stars and things like that. And I thought, well, it is kind of difficult to draw the stars, because I have to draw around the little lights, and I don't put the white dot there. And so I thought, well, I want to draw a picture of Los Angeles, and it shouldn't be hard to draw a grid with, little dots if I can make constellations. Well, it's much harder. And as I was drawing this iconic view of Los Angeles, I was like, well, I'm going to draw Los Angeles, and then what? And I'll just have a drawing of Los Angeles. And so I thought there should be something more. There should be something that makes Los Angeles more special than Los Angeles. And then I thought, well, I should put a cherry on top. So I put one cherry on top. And then I was like, well, one cherry doesn't seem like enough. Maybe more cherries, maybe something else. And as I was thinking this, literally, that song, I Got 5 on It, came on. And I was like, yes, it should be 5 cherries. So this is Los Angeles with 5 cherries on top. Or, well, it's just called Los Angeles with cherries on top. I thought a lot about animals that were kept in captivity when I was in lockdowns and teaching on Zoom and all this stuff. And so I kept thinking about that whale, Tilikum, who he had killed his trainer in San Diego at like a SeaWorld or something like that. And his life was like really sad and pathetic. And I thought, I want to draw Tilikum. So I modeled this killer whale after Tilikum. And I decided I wanted to draw him in outer space. And as I was drawing, I was like, there needs to be something more. There is there's a movie that I used to watch that was called Pinocchio in Outer Space, and I still watch it, and I thought, well, Pinocchio should be there. So I put Pinocchio at the top of the drawing, and there's this balloon that is from the book Goodnight Moon that both of these entities can be aware of the balloon, but they can't really be aware of the other entity in this massive universe. And it was, just about these two entities that just felt alone in this universe, but just couldn't make contact with anything else that was there. This talk is going too long, so I can continue and just do the rest, or I could stop here and I can show you my encore, which is a little puppet show. What do you all think? Continue? All right, I'll continue. This last piece is called What the Whale Dreamt. I'll try to speak less. This drawing started with the borders, and I made a border, and then a border within the border, and then this curtain, and then I thought, well, I should put something inside there. And I thought I should make some dogs on chains. And so I drew dogs on chains. And as I was drawing these dogs, the Tommy Two-Tone song 8675309 kept going through my head. And I thought, well, I think I should put the lyrics to the song in there. So it says, hey, Jenny, Jenny, who can I turn to? You give me something I can hold on to. I can't remember how it goes, and I can't read it here. But anyways, so the words to the song are in the drawing, and then there's a bird and a cat and another bird, and they're also saying lyrics from the song. And the phone number is down here. It says 8675309, and these flags also say, for a good time call, 8675309. This is my cat, one of 6 cats that I have right now, and her name is Boo, and she is the sweetest kitty in the whole world. And so I wanted to make a portrait of her. And this is my drawing of Boo. There's also song lyrics in this drawing, and these banners say, my love must be a kind of blind love. I can't see anything but you. And then these banners up here say, all I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm. This drawing in 2023, yes, the ivory-billed woodpecker went from the endangered species list to the extinct species list. And I was kind of devastated by the news. The ivory-billed woodpecker had a nickname, and it was also known as the Lord God bird. And the reason it was known as the Lord God bird is because when people would see it, it had this huge wingspan and this beautiful red plume on its head, and people would see it and they would go, Lord God, look at that bird, So this woodpecker was also the inspiration for Woody Woodpecker. And the last time the bird was actually officially seen was in 1948. They keep the animals on the endangered species list as long as they possibly can. There's been a lot of maybe sightings of the bird, but they decided it was time to move the bird to the extinct species list. And I thought I should make a tribute to the ivory-billed woodpecker. My influences are many and varied. I have 2 files on my computer, one that says stuff to look at, and the other one says more stuff to look at. And these are all images that I find in those files and things that I'm interested in. Dubstep dance and finger tutting, both things that if you don't know about them, you should. I love folk art. This is more extinct birds. This is the great auk that went extinct because people like to collect its eggs. This is a film still from Thomas Edison's first movie. I mean, if you're going to make a movie, the first movie ever, really? An infant being carried away by a giant bird? I mean... So my partner is also an artist. She doesn't really make art very much anymore, but she's really one of these people that has influenced so much of my life. And so this is one of the pieces that she's made that I like. I think it is so brilliant. So we lived in a house for a time, and I had 2 sculptures of cars that were in the garage. She needed a studio to work in, and the rest of our house was filled with artwork. So she built a house, and it was a small shack-like space, and she would use it as her studio. It was in our driveway, in front of our garage, but on the other side of a gate. So as you looked up the driveway, you saw the gate, and you saw the pitch of the roof over the gate. But right as she had finished making it, our neighbors told us the city is coming around, and if they can see anything above your gate that is not a permanent structure, they're going to make you take it down. And so she was devastated. She was like, I just made this thing. I need to keep it. What do I do? And so it was on wheels. We pushed it aside, and she came up with this idea: if I disguise it to make it look like an RV, nobody will make me take it down. So as you looked at our house from the street, nobody was the wiser. Nobody made us take it down. Our neighbors were constantly asking us what kind of mileage our RV got and if we were going to go camping. And so it worked out quite well. We still have the Tioga studio, but it has been converted into our guest room. So when I was about 8 years old, my family went to Spain, and we were there for about a month. My father had to be there as part of his job. And for the first time in my life, I saw art. And I was so moved by Francisco Goya. And I just couldn't wrap my 8-year-old mind around what was going on in his paintings. Some of them were so dark. They were more real than television. I had been exposed to plenty of violence in cartoons, and I knew that violence happened, and I was raised as a Catholic. Both my parents were Catholic, and I certainly knew about violence and blood, but this seemed more real than anything that I had ever seen. And I saw this painting, and I said, "Mom, I want to be an oil painter when I get old. Can I have some oil paints for my birthday?" And so there were many disturbing drawing that came home from school of public executions and things that I did when I was, and this piece, the 3rd of May, has found its way into my work even as a professional artist. And it really still just moves me, the whole story of it and the tragedy of it and the darkness of it. My work is also influenced by my first professor in ceramics. And he was really kind of a joker, and he taught me, put a joke in your fine art. Nobody is going to expect a good joke there, and it just makes it all the more funnier if you put it in a place where nobody expects to find it. He's here with Bigfoot remains that he had created. He always liked to say, "I always wanted to find a dinosaur, but I didn't like to travel." So he built these bones, and then he buried them in his backyard. And when it rained, he invented a alter ego for himself, and he went across the country giving lectures about the Bigfoot remains that he had found. He was known as Dr. Gladstone, and he invented this pseudo-scientific language where he would speak to you about the Paleolithic remains from the pre-credulous era that he had discovered, and he invented all kinds of instruments where you could use to go out into the world and find your own remains. And there was Bigfoot droppings that he had also found, and tools that you could use to point at rocks and find out if it was a genuine Bigfoot dumping, or dropping, whatever. And one of his proudest achievements was getting noticed by the National Enquirer, and also I think the Daily Sun and several other kind of conspiracy type magazines featured his work in them. He put all of these remains, he continued to make these remains throughout the 80s, and he put them together in a museum that he called the Museum of Unnatural History. And for a quarter, he would tell you stories about the remains that were in the museum. He closed the museum, and then he reopened it after he had retired, and that museum was open until he died not too long ago. So I felt like my work was really influenced deeply by Francisco Goya on one end and Clayton Bailey on the other end. And I feel like my work has these two sides to it. Sometimes it's in one piece, and sometimes it's like a pendulum swinging back and forth. And my work goes from being sad to miserable to tragic, and then way too dark, and then it swings, and then it gets fun and silly, and then stupid, and then it swings back the other way. So for a time here, I was making couples. Like this piece is one of these pieces that I think has the dark in it and also the light in it. It's called A Rock and a Hard Place. This is a couple that I made, and it's called Two Yellow Books About Fish. This is another couple, and it's called Hanging Tough, and There Goes My Everything. This piece is called Big Papa. Sophia Loren and her woodland friends, and Picasso Bunny. I discovered that I could paint stickers and little clippings from comic books onto things and make them look like they had been torn off, like the stickers had been torn off. And then I started drawing or painting these things on everything. Again, this is all unfired clay, and it's got a coat of paint on it. There's nothing magical that's holding it together, just prayers and spit and a layer of paint. This is called Love Taker. So they get really sweet too, like this one is called Sleep Tight, and it was in a bigger show, and the pieces were all pieces that, the show is called Messages to My 20-Year-Old Self. But just as they get sweet, I turn around and I do something that just poops all over it. And so this piece is called Ponderosa, or Have a Lovely Day. And on the other side of the matchbook, it says Have a Lovely Day. This is called Little Heap. This is my American flag. And sometimes, the work is really just about, formal qualities of sculpture, and me really just enjoying the delicious kind of chore of making these intricate little things. Some of my favorite work that I make is work that is not really ever going to be shown, and is work that is only made for a very specific audience and is oftentimes really badly documented. And these are works that I make as gifts. And I feel like your mind can really change when you are thinking about making art, when you are making art for getting ready for a show, or making art when you're thinking about your friend, or you're making work and you're thinking about your true love, or you're making work to this I gave to a friend of mine, and it was he was doing me a favor in coming to my class and lecturing to my class. And so as a gift, because I couldn't pay him money, I made him this book. So this is my cat, Philip, and I thought it was a good way to end this show with. So that's that, unless you want an encore. Yes. Encore. All right. Okay, so as I was telling you, during the pandemic, I was trying to write and illustrate children's stories, and I couldn't figure out how to illustrate them. I've written all these poems, and these poems, they're kind of like nursery rhymes, except for they didn't rhyme, and they weren't really for children. So different ways I thought about telling these stories was by narrating them. And I had made this hand puppet, and I, let's see, move this up here. How do I turn it to? There you go. So I made this hand puppet, and one night when it was very late in 2020, and I was very tired and maybe a little drunk, I narrated this poem that I wrote, and I read it to this hand puppet that I made. The poem is called "Without Jays." So this is "Without Jays."
There will be apple pie. We will have birds in our skies. We will have cheese. We will have Disneyland. There will be earwax for everyone, and fingers and goodness. There will be hope, and there will be ice cream, but no jumping rope. There will be plenty of kisses and lawyers and music, but it will be a joyless, jokeless, and jelly beanless world without the letter J. Such a likable letter, an uppercase T with a hook, a lowercase I with a monkey's tail. Don't think you will be unjaded by the hijacking of the letter J. You will be jonesing for a J in no time. Our world will have its share of noodles and nuns, outlaws, oak trees, and peacocks. Pleasantries and penalties. We will have queens and quaaludes, rare and raging rhinos, radiant rhododendrons, and all 7 seas. But sadly, our years will hardly be whole without January, June, and July. Romeo will be forever lost without his Juliet. What will become of Tom without Jerry? Jack and Jill went up the hill, never to be heard from again. All the Joes must go, all the Johns will be gone. All the Janes, Plain, Doe, and Mary will go out with January. But we will have tea and tubas, time and tic-tac-toe. We will have turtle doves on our tombstones and partridges in our pear trees. We will have umbrellas, underwear, and unicorns. It will be a utopia for everyone except for the letter J. We will have violets, violins, and vampires. Though the vampires are violent, the incessant biting of our jugulars is not nearly as sad as Halloween without jack-o'-lanterns, gambling without jackpots, or all the little yellow jackets sent out with light windbreakers instead. There will be shortages of jackknives, jerks, jackasses, and bullfrogs named Jeremiah. Giraffes will no longer be named Jeffrey. It will break my heart when the Julies depart. It would hurt far less to pluck the whiskers from kittens or to cut off my nose and eyelashes. There will be no more jogging through the jacarandas on June nights in Jerusalem. The Jannas and Joannas will no longer make jelly. Truth be told, our world just won't be right without its Jennifers. No Anistons, Hudsons, or Grays, no Love Hewitts, no Jason Lees. Goodbye, Miss Jenny from the block. Goodbye, Miss Lawrence. Good luck finding a junkyard in Jersey, a juniper tree on Jupiter, jambalaya in Japan, or a cup of joe in Juneau. Jamaica will be in jeopardy, Java will be jinxed, and beware of all jasmine that jive talks. We will have whats, wheres, and whos. We will have whales and wintertime and watermelon. We will be like jumbled bags of bones without joints to move around. Our bellies will not be jiggly. Our jaws will no longer jabber. Our peaches will not be juicy, and we will have no jugs to contain our whiskey. We will have Roger and Xmas, but they will not be jolly. We will have X-ray vision, Xerox machines, and Generation X, but the jig is up for the letter J. Put down your trombones, there will be none of that jazz. We will have all things yin and yang. We will have all things yam and yolk. We will have yards of yarn and years of yearning. Yet there will not be a single jar of jam in all the world or a jellyfish in the sea. Our June bugs and jailbirds will finally fly away. We will have plenty of zeros and zeds. There will be a zig for every zag. But our jetliners, jacuzzis, jockeys, jungles, and juniors will all go the way of the janitors. Jolene, Jesse's girl, and Johnny Be Good were last seen in a Jaguar, taking a joyride and singing joy to the world. James Dean, Janet Jackson, Janis Joplin, and Jesse James all took the J train out of town. And on Judgment Day, Judas and Jesus drank mint juleps near a silent jukebox, all the while humming Just the Two of Us.
That's it.